Srinivasachari, Chapter 2, The Beginnings of Gingee. Gingee had not developed into a place of note in the age of the Cholas of the Vijayalaya dynasty. We have, however, a large number of Chola epigraphs scattered in the neighborhood of the place. An inscription of Aditya I refers to Singapura Nadu, which evidently centered around Singavaram. The Cholas had control over the present South Arcot district and the province of Jayangonda Chola Mandalam, named after Rajendra Chola I, included the region of Gingee and extended from the Pala river on the north to Tiruvadi near Panruti, 14 miles west of Kadalur. There is a village of the name Jayangondan situated about 2 miles from Gingee. Devanur is another village of the neighborhood said to have been founded by a Chola chief, Bhuloka Devendran. In the epoch of the disruption of the Chola Empire in the 13th century, consequent on the encroachments of the Pandyas, the Hoysalas, and the Kakatiyas, and on the increasing turbulence of the feudatories, Gingee might have become a fortified place. The chief source for the first 200 years of the history of the place, besides a few epigraphs, is the complete history of the Carnatic kings. In Tamil, Karnataka Rajakal Savistara Charitram, found among the Mackenzie manuscripts. It was compiled after a consultation of numerous authorities, both Hindu and Muhammadan, by one Narayanan, who claimed to be a descendant of the Anandakon clan of Gingee. The narrative was written at the special request of Colonel William MacLeod, who was then acting as commissioner at Arcot, the Met governor at the time being Lord Bentinck. The book is fairly valuable so far as such crude annals can be in many historical details and is marked by an absence of exaggeration which is the bane of all early Indian chroniclers. According to Narayanan, Gingee became a fortified place only about 1200 AD. Anandakon, a shepherd by caste, accidentally found a treasure in one of the cavities of the western hill while grazing his sheep. Making himself the head of a small band of warriors, he defeated the petty rulers of the neighboring villages like Devanur, Jayangonda, and Melacheri, or Old Gingee, and built a small fortress on Kamalagiri, which he renamed Anandagiri after himself. He raised his castemen to high places and bestowed on them the distinction of Sammana Manar, the honorable. Anandakon fortified Perumukkal near Tindivanam, which was the scene of some operations in the Carnatic wars of the 18th century, and Padaivedu near Polur in North Arcot. After reigning gloriously for about 50 years, he was succeeded by one Krishna Kon about 1240 AD. This chief perpetuated his name by fortifying the northern hill and naming it after himself. Krishna Kon was followed by two princes successively, Koneri Kon and Govinda Kon, who cut out the elaborate steps to the fortress on Krishnagiri and built the Gopala Swami temple on its top. Puliyakon succeeded him about 1300 AD. He excavated tanks and built rest houses by the sides of the roads leading to Trichinopoli, Tanjore, and Vettavalam, a small zamindari in the neighborhood. 20 years afterwards, this shepherd race was superseded by the chief of a neighboring place, Kobilingan by name, who belonged to the Kurumba caste and now ascended the throne of Gingee. He built a brick fort at Sendamangalam in the taluk of Tirukkoilur, dug some tanks, left others which he began in an unfinished condition, and cut out various channels for irrigation purposes, some of which are believed to exist even today. He had a large number of feudatories who acknowledged his suzerainty, and some of them had fortresses at Ashupur, Pelakuppur, Kuppam, and other places. It was this Kobilingan that fell a prey to the ambition of Vijayanagar, but it is not definitely known when and by which general the conquest was achieved. The loss of independence of the fort did not lead, however, to any diminution in its importance. Thus, the dynasty of the Kons gave way to the Kurumbas, whose ruler Kobilingan, perhaps connected with Kopiranjunga, is said to have built a fort at Sendamangalam in the neighborhood. This latter place was the headquarters of the powerful Chola feudatory Koperanjinga. With the rise of the Vijayanagara Empire and its absorption of the greater part of South India, unity of control and administration spread throughout the country. And Gingee, like the other principalities of Madura and Tanjore, was brought under its wide sovereignty. The subjugation of Gingee by the Vijayanagara power about the close of the 14th century is referred to in the Mackenzie manuscripts, which says that Gingee submitted to Narasingaraya, who held it as a fief of Vijayanagara, sending an annual tribute. The Kurumbars. According to the Mackenzie manuscripts, the Tondamandalam country was inhabited by wild forest tribes who had no culture. Men were then naked savages with no regular marriage institutions. Out of such forest tribes arose men who, though first ignorant of civilization, in course of time evolved a rude organization and agreed to abide by the decision of one among themselves whom they made their chief. Probably Kobilingan, who is referred to as the first Kurumba chief, was the one who was followed by the Vijayanagara rulers. This chief has been credited with having divided the region into administrative divisions with fortified strongholds, Pural in Puralkottam being his headquarters, which was situated near the modern Red Hills Lake adjoining Madras. The Tondamandalam country was named after them as Kurumba Bhumi. Afterwards, the Kurumba Bhumi was held to have been invaded by the Chola Adondai Chakravarti. The Kurumbas then formed the ruling class. The ruins of their forts are supposed to be still visible, and some very old walls of these near Madras are mentioned. The fort destroyed by Krishnadevaraya at Marutam near Kanchivaram in the Uttaramerur area was, according to legend, built by the Kurumbas, covering more than 40 acres of land with two boundary walls. Lynch Scoton says in Purchas, Volume 10, that the Canarins and the Corumbins are the countrymen dealing with land, fishing, and such like labors. They are, in a manner, of dark brown color, their dwelling places being on the seaside. Some of these Kurumbas became the ruling classes, while others lived by other means like the rearing of sheep and goats, which was their main occupation. According to the Mackenzie manuscripts, they made blankets out of goat's hair and sold them. Some others among them made and sold chunam, and some were hunters who lived by the chase. The Kurubas or Kurumbas are generally regarded by ethnologists and other writers as being composed of two distinct groups, namely the jungle Kurumbas of the Nilgiris and other hilly regions, and the civilized Kurumbas of the plains. Dr. G. Oppert would regard the Kurumbas as very old inhabitants forming the indigenes of the land who can contest with their Dravidian kinsmen the priority of occupation of the Indian soil. He would also say that the terms Kurumba and Kuruba were originally identical. The Madras Caste Census Report, sorry, the Madras Census Report for 1891 thus first postulated their widespread character. The Kurumbas or Kurubas are the modern representatives of the ancient Kurumbas or Pallavas, who were once so powerful throughout southern India, but very little trace of their greatness now remains. In the 7th century, the power of the Pallava kings seems to have been at its zenith. But shortly after this, the Kongu, Chola, and Chalukya chiefs succeeded in winning several victories over them. The final overthrow of the Kurumba sovereignty was effected by the Chola king Adundai about the 7th or 8th century AD, and the Kurumbas were scattered far and wide. Many fled to the hills, and in the Nilgiris and the Wayanad, in Coorg and Mysore, representatives of this ancient race are now found as wild and uncivilized tribes. Elsewhere, the Kurumbas are more advanced and are usually shepherds and weavers of coarse woolen blankets. The name Kuruba is said to be a derivative of the Canaries root kuru, sheep, Tamil kori, but it has been contended that the Kurumbas were not originally a purely shepherd tribe, and it has been held that the particular kind of sheep called kori is so called because it is the sheep of the Kurumbas. Again, the ancient lexicographer of the Tamil language, Pingalamuni, defines the Kurumbar as Kurunila Mannar or petty chieftains. But the most common derivation is from the Tamil Kurumbu, equivalent to wickedness, so that Kurumban means a wicked man. With this may be compared the derivation of Kallan from Kalavu or theft, and the Kallans were generally believed to have been closely connected, if not identical, with the original Kurumbas. On the other hand, the true derivation may be in the other direction, as in the case of the Slavs. After their final overthrow, they became scattered over many of the districts in the plains and the forest tracts of Malabar, the Nilgiris, Coimbatore, and Mysore. They are found at the present time in various grades of civilization. Those that live in the plains have adopted the manners and customs of the Hindu castes in whose midst they live, while those that inhabit the hills are still in their primitive state, being more akin in habits to the rude hill folk surrounding them. The assumption that the Kurubas who are found in towns and villages are of the same stock as the uncivilized jungle tribes, the Kadu Kurubas, is notwithstanding the traditionally accepted version highly doubtful. In customs, beliefs, and other vital matters, the two communities differ from each other very much. This pretension to a descent from a ruling race is not advanced anywhere as far as this enquiry has proceeded. Only some say that they came to Mysore first from Vijayanagar and that their original place is Mailara in the Bellary district. Quite possibly, the so-called Kadu Kurubas are the locally surviving representatives in southern India of the primitive aborigines. After firstly 800, according to the chronicle, Narasingha Udayar is said to have become the viceroy of Gingee, and the Maharaya of Anegundi, Vijayanagaram, and Penukonda sent an army against the aforesaid Kobilingan. And having conquered his country, the Maharaya delivered it over to Narasingha Udayar to be held as a fief, paying tribute to headquarters. At the same time, a donation was made to a temple. Also, about this time, the Raja of Vandivash, named Bhupatiraya Udayar, ruled over the land. And Veera Vijayarayar was also another ruler in the district. Even before these lieutenants had left Vijayanagara, Vellala Raya is said to have ruled over the Gingee country about firstly 750 and to have made additions to the shrine at Tiruvannamalai. He paid tribute to the Raya, and after he fell, the country came to be divided among petty chiefs. This is the gist of the information contained in the chronicle regarding the troubled period between the disappearance of the Kon dynasty and the establishment of the overlordship of Vijayanagara. Inconsistencies, both chronological and sequential, occur several times in this account. Vellala Raya evidently refers to Ballala III, Veera Ballala of the Hoysala dynasty, and perhaps also to his son Ballala IV, surnamed Veera Virupaksha Ballala, alias Hampeya Vodayar, who disappeared in 1346 to 47. The Hoysalas had been steadily encroaching into the lower Karnataka country from about the early decades of the 13th century. Narasimha II occupied Kanchi, the old Pallava capital, and a record of 1229 AD says that he was ruling from Kanchi with the surrounding ocean as his boundary. A previous record of 1223 AD states that Narasimha, pursuing after the Trikalinga kings, penetrated their train of elephants, displaying unequaled valor. This probably refers to his driving out of Kanchi some years before he occupied it, the Telugu Chola chief Tikka, who also claims to have been a Chola Sthapanacharya. The next Hoysala sovereign, Veera Someshwara, who ruled from 1234 to 1254 AD, claims to have uprooted in battle Rajendra Chola III and later to have given him protection when he sought refuge and to have engaged in a victorious expedition against the Kadavaraya. Someshwara pushed on his conquest into the Pandya territory against its aggressive ruler. One of his capitals was Kannanur or Vikramapura to the north of Srirangam in the Tiruchinappalli district. At this place, there is a ruined fort containing a temple known as Poisaleshwara, whose image was set up by Someshwara. On the death of Someshwara, there was a division of his kingdom between his two sons, Veera Narasimha or Narasimha III, who got the greater part of the ancestral kingdom and ruled from Dora Samudra as his capital, and his half-brother Ramanatha or Veera Ramanatha, who got the Kolar district and the Tamil territories conquered by Narasimha, and who ruled from Kannanur as his capital. The two brothers were not at peace with each other, and much of the time of Narasimha III was spent in fighting against Ramanatha, who was frequently the aggressor. Ramanatha ruled from 1255 to 1295 AD. And after his time, there was the short-lived rule of his son Vishwanatha. Ballala III, the son of Veera Narasimha, succeeded his father in 1292 and became the sole ruler of the entire Hoysala kingdom, including the Tamil districts about the year 1298. It was in his reign that the Hoysala power began rapidly to decline. He lost the southern portions of the Tamil country originally subject to him, but practically retained the control of the whole of Kongu. About the time of the death of Ballala III, Harihara, the founder of the Vijayanagara dynasty, was already established in some measure of power. A chief named Vallappa Dandanayakar, who frequently figures in the later records of Ballala III, was probably the Aliya or son-in-law Vallappar, a Mahamandaleshwara under Harihara I. This Vallappa was perhaps the same as Vellalaraya of the tradition in the chronicle. He is said to have ruled over the Gingee country about firstly 750, that is about 1341 AD, and to have made additions to the shrine at Tiruvannamalai and to have paid tribute to the Raya. Still another feudatory of the Hoysala was Gopinatha, a descendant of the famous Perumal Dandanayaka, who described himself as the Lord of the South. This attempted identification is supported by the traditional story relating to the final destruction of the Hoysalas under Ballala IV. Vallappa Udayar, the Alia or son-in-law of Ballala III, should be very likely the Senji Raja married to the king Ballala IV's sister. Ballala IV had to fight continuously with the various feudatory chiefs of his kingdom and the powerful sultans of Madura who had built up their independent rule. And the latter had indeed secured a victory over Ballala III near Kannanur, where the Hindus were put to flight and the aged Hoysala and the aged Hoysala monarch himself was captured, strangled, and flayed, the stuffed skin being hung on the walls of Madura, where the Moorish traveler Ibn Battuta says that he saw it suspended at the time of his visit to the place. Thus did the great struggle of the Hoysala monarch end, about AD 1342 or 3. This monarch had been striving all along, rebuilding his capital and fortifying places of strategic importance on the eastern frontier like Kannanur and Tiruvannamalai. Evidence has also been forthcoming that he laid the foundations of the city of Virupakshapattana in order to strengthen his northern frontier and was actually in residence there in AD 1339. He had his son anointed as his successor against eventualities, and an inscription of Malur would credit him with the setting up of a pillar of victory at the head of the bridge at Rameshwaram, Setumula Jayastambha. It is possible that Kannanur had become the target of active attacks by the Muhammadans of Madura against the Hoysala defense of the Tamil country, and we find Veera Ballala frequently fighting near Trichinopalli, and the Kaban of Ibn Battuta is held to be no other than Kannanur, near which his last battle was fought. Soon after this, Ballala IV, already anointed ruler, succeeded to the dangerous heritage and kept it up till his eventual disappearance in AD 1346 or 1347, after which no more of the Hoysalas is heard. Thus, the Gingee country was under the rule of the Hoysalas in the later part of the 13th century and in the first half of the 14th. From the Hoysalas, it passed on by relatively easy efforts into the hands of the first rulers of Vijayanagara. The governorship of Gopanaraya, who has been already mentioned above over the region, and his able efforts at seconding the conquests of Kamparaya have to be noted. The Vijayanagara Empire had extended its authority over the Tamil country even beyond Madura by the end of the 14th century. It exercised dominion through local governors who were practically free to do as they liked, provided they rendered fealty to the central power and supplied it with regular tribute and contingents whenever called upon to do so. The more important among these governors developed in the 15th century into formidable territorial rulers. Shaluva Narasimha was a typical provincial ruler. In the 16th century, when the limits of the empire came to be very far flung and the whole of the central power weakened even shortly after Sri Krishnadevaraya's time, we find some of the Nayaks emerging out as the hereditary rulers of Gingee, Tanjore, and Madura. The troubled period of the 14th century under the control of governors before the establishment of the Nayaks is not known to us in detail. Kumara Kampana, son of Bukkaraya I, who was the governor of the Mulbagal country, made conquests in the Tondamandala region with the help of Gopanarya and of Shaluvamanga, the ancestor of the great governor of Chandragiri and the usurper of royal throne itself, Shaluva Narasimha. This Kamparaya, otherwise named Kampana Udayar, was the governor of the Mulbagal Rajya from 1356 to 1366 AD. He is also called Kampana II in order to distinguish him from an uncle and a brother of the same name. His exploits are described by his queen Ganga Devi in the Sanskrit work Veera Kamparaya Charitram, published at Trivandrum in 1916. Kampana's conquests in the south. Kampana first reached Virinchipuram on the Pala river and from it attacked the strong fortress of Rajagambiram, in which the Sambhavaraya chief had taken refuge. He captured the fortress and slew his enemy in single combat, according to one set of authorities. According to other sources, he is said to have reinstated the defeated ruler on his throne. The Rajagambira Malai referred to in the accounts was evidently a hill fort. And soon after its capture, Kampana entered Kanchi and set up his authority there. An inscription found at Madam in the North Arcot district, dated 1363, specifically states that Gandharaguli Marayanayaka, son of Somaya Dandanayaka, the Mahapradhani of Kampana II, defeated and took captive Verumangonda Sambhavaraya and captured Rajagambiramalai. This chief built a gopura in the second prakara of Tiruvagalishwaramudaya Mahadeva of Kulattur, according to the record. Kampana's own inscription at Tiruputkuli near Kanchi, recording his capture of the Rajagambira Rajya, is dated Saka 1287, that is 1365 to 66. The Rajagambira hill has been identified with Padaiveedu in the North Arcot district. The latest record of Kampana is dated Saka 1296 or 1374 AD, and his son Jammanna Udayar is described as governing the same provinces as his father had ruled over in that year, that is Shaka 1296. The son made certain gifts for the merit of his deceased father, according to inscriptions dated in the same year, Shaka 1296, found at Tiruvannamalai and Yale. Kampana Udayar's rule was almost like that of an independent sovereign, and his reputation and power were considerable on account of his services against the Mohammedans of the south. His capital itself was, according to the Veera Kamparaya Charitam, Marakata Nagara, identified with Virinchipuram, which was the headquarters of a provincial governor in the period of the later Vijayanagara sovereigns. Kampana Udayar was assisted by several able lieutenants who served him both as ministers and generals. Besides Gopana, there was the illustrious Somappa, whose son Maraya Nayaka, referred to above, was the captor of the Sambhavaraya and of his fort Rajagambiramalai. Another was Govindarasar, who is mentioned in the Koiluluhu, a Tamil work detailing the traditional account of the endowments of the great charities done to the Srirangam shrine in the course of the centuries. Shaluva Mangu is stated in the Bhyudaya and the Rama Bhyudaya to have been one of the officers who accompanied Kampana in his campaign against Champaraya or Shambhuvaraya and the Sultan of the South, that is Madura, and it was through his intervention that Champaraya was held to have been reinstated in his dominion, for he is described as Chamburaya Sthapanacharya. He made notable gifts to the Brahmins of the Srirangam shrine, and perhaps on account of the services he rendered in restoring worship at the temple there, after his recapture of the place from the Mohammedans, he was also styled Sriranga Sthapanacharya. Kamparaya's inscriptions are found in the Punya Kotishwara shrine at Little Kanjivaram, one of which says that he conferred on Parakala Nambi certain titles and honors at Kalavai in the Arcot Taluk, at Avur in the South Arcot district, and at Tiruppulivanam in the North Arcot district. Besides Kamparaya, there was another son of Bukka by name Sayana Udayar, who ruled over a part of the North Arcot, South Arcot, and Tanjore districts, and one of whose inscriptions dated Saka 1382 AD has been found at Kalakudi in the distant Ramna district, while another comes from Kangayam in the Coimbatore district. The Alampundi grant of Virupaksha, both in Grantha and Tamil, is important for our knowledge of the history of Gingee under the early Vijayanagara rulers. It is dated Shaka 1305 and records that Virupaksha I, son of Harihara II of the first Vijayanagara dynasty, granted on the Pushya Sankranti day of Shaka 1305 Raktakshin, the village of Alampundi in the Gingee taluk, to certain Brahmanas as Sarvamanyam. The first and second verses of the Alampundi inscription contain invocations addressed to the boar incarnation of Vishnu and to the goddess of the earth, respectively. The third verse refers to Bukkaraja I, who belonged to the race of the moon and who was the son of Sangama the first by Kamakshi. Bukka's son was King Harihara II, who, as in other inscriptions, is said to have performed the 16 great gifts. Harihara II married Malladevi, who belonged to the family of Ramadeva, and their son was Virupaksha, who conquered the kings of Tundira, Chola, and Pandya, and the Simhalas, and presented the booty of his wars to his father. On the day of the Pushya Sankranti of the year Raktakshin, which corresponds to the Shaka year 1305, the Raktakshin year does not correspond to Shaka Samvat 1305, but to 1307 current, King Virupaksha granted to certain unnamed Brahmanas of various Gotras the village of Alampundi. This village had been the object of a previous grant by Harihara II and had then received the surname Jannambikabdhi. The pronouns Mama and Maya in lines 17 and 21 show that both Harihara's previous grant and the present donation of Virupaksha were made at the instance of a princess who was the sister of Harihara II and consequently the paternal aunt of Virupaksha, and whose name must have been Jannambika, because the village of Alampundi received the surname Jannambika Abdi, that is Jannambika Samudram. Abdi is a more poetical synonym of Samudra, a frequent ending of village names. Hence, the actual surname was probably Jannambika Samudram, after her own name. The description of the boundaries of the granted village is contained in lines 22 to 26. Then follow three of the customary imprecatory verses. The inscription ends with the name Sri Harihara. The Alampundi plate would add considerably to our knowledge of the history of the first Vijayanagara dynasty if we could be quite sure of the genuineness of the plate. As in other inscriptions of this dynasty, the first historical person is said to have been Sangama I. Alampundi plate is the only inscription which informs us of the name of Sangama's queen, viz. Kamakshi. According to the same plate, the queen of Harihara II was Malladevi. The Satyamangalam plates of Devaraya II give the name of Harihara's queen as Malambika. As the two names Malladevi and Malambika are very similar, we may for the present consider them as identical. The Alampundi record adds that Malladevi belonged to the family of Ramadeva. It is not impossible that Malladevi was related to the Yadava king Ramachandra, who was also called Ramadeva and who reigned from Saka Samvat 1193 to 1230. It is from the present inscription that we first learn that Harihara II had a sister called Jannambika and a son called Virupaksha, who is reported to have made extensive conquests in the south and whom his father appears to have placed in charge of at least a portion of the South Arcot district. The date of the grant of Virupaksha, Saka Samvat 1305 for 1307, the Raktakshi Samvatsara, is a few years later than the accession of Harihara II, datable between 1293 and 1301 Saka. In referring to a previous grant of the village of Alampundi by Harihara II himself, The inscription implies that the latter was ruling over a portion of the modern South Arcot district even before Shaka Samvat 1307. We do not know from other sources that at this time he had already extended his dominions into that part of the country. The earliest inscriptions of Harihara II that have hitherto been discovered in the south are dated Saka Samvat 1315. Consequently, it is at least doubtful if the date of the Alampundi plate can be looked upon as genuine. If the weekday had been mentioned in the date, it could be verified by an expert, and the result of such verification would help considerably in deciding whether the grant is genuine or not. The omission of the weekday and of the names of the donees may also be urged against the genuineness of the document. The orthographical as well as the calligraphical mistakes in which this small inscription abounds, and the uncouth language and construction which, to a casual reader, render it difficult to say who its actual donor was, Harihara, Virupaksha, or Jannambika, are other facts which may be urged against the genuineness of the plate. On the other hand, we cannot definitely pronounce the inscription to be a forgery because the date Saka Samvat 1305 or 1307 actually falls into the reign of Harihara II, who in verse 4 is spoken of as if he was living at the time of the grant. In spite of the doubts which may thus be reasonably entertained as to its genuineness, the grant is interesting as the first known copperplate inscription in Grantha characters professing to belong to the Vijayanagara dynasty. Description in pages 225 to 226 of the Epigraphia Indica and record of the Archaeological Survey of India, edited by E. Hirsch, volume the 3rd, 1894 to 95. The Muhammadan sack of Srirangam, its reconsecration by Vijayanagara, its connection with Shingavaram. The sack of Srirangam by Malik Kafur is deemed as having very probably occurred since he sacked all the temples round Kandur or Kannanur, and since Srirangam had received vast and magnificent benefactions in the preceding century, particularly from Sundara Pandya, who succeeded in AD 1251, whose munificence is yet green in the traditions of the people. Kumara Kampana, son of Bukkaraya I, led expeditions into the Tamil country, the exact dates of which have not been ascertained with precision, but which certainly constituted a continuation of the Hoysala effort against the Musalman power of the south. According to numismatic evidence, we have the coins of Adil Shah of Mathura, dated AD 1356, of Fakhruddin Mubarak Shah, dated AD 1360, and of Alauddin Sikandar Shah, whose latest coin bears the date Al-Hijri 779 or AD 1377 or 78. Dr. S.K. Iyengar holds that the wars of Kamparaya would have to be brought in the period of the interregnum at Madura, Al-Hijri 745 to 757, as indicated by a break in the coinage. According to the Tamil Chronicle of the Temple of Madura, Madurai Taravaralaru, compiled about AD 1801, the founder of the Muhammadan dynasty at Madura was Sultan Malik Nemi, and the date of the establishment of his power was Saka 1256, equivalent to AD 1334. And after this first ruler, there were followed 7 actual rulers till the Hindu power was restored in AD 1371 by Kampana Udayar, commander of the guards of the Mysore ruler from the point of view of the writer of the record in its final form, who was the viceroy of the Mulbagal Maharaja and had all the south for his sphere of influence. According to this chronicle, Kampana had been assigned the duty of doorkeeper of the last great Hoysala king, Veeraballala III. Kampana conquered Tondaimandalam, took possession of the Rajagambhira Rajyam, which was the dominion of the Shambhavarayans, with its fort at Padaivedu near Arni and not the Pandyan kingdom as had been held. And he completed his achievement by the conquest of Madura and by the restoration of the great temples of Srirangam and Madura to their pristine glory. The two great enemies overrun by Kampana were the Sambhavarayans and the Madura Sultans. We learn from the Kamparaya Charitam of Ganga Devi, one of the wives of Kampana, a contemporary epic in Sanskrit, since published in the Trivandrum Sanskrit series, that Kampana started against Champa, defeated near Virinchipuram the forces of Champaraya or Sambhavaraya, laid siege to the citadel of Rajagambiram or Padaividu, and killed Champaraya in a duel. Kampana proceeded to Kanchi and, having stationed his forces there, stayed for a season at Marakata or Virinchipuram, where a goddess appeared to him in a vision, and after describing the horrors and cruelties practiced by the Turushkas or Mohammedans of Madura, exhorted him to extirpate the invaders and restore the country to its ancient glory, and gave him a divine sword of extraordinary potency with which to accomplish the great mission, saying that, as by fate the rulers of the Pandya line have lost their prowess, the sage Agastya has sent this sword, originally wielded by the Lord Shiva in his fight with the Asuras, to be placed in your strong hands. Then Kampana proceeded against the Sultan of Madura and killed him in battle. The significance of this epic is obvious. Since the sword of protection of the Dharma of Hindu South India had fallen away from the enfeebled hands of the degenerate Pandyas, Agastya, the culture hero protector of the Tamil country, had to invite the strong arm of the growing Vijayanagara power in the shape of Kampana Udayar, so that the role of the guardian of the Tamil country and of its independence and cultural heritage had to be sustained by the rising Rayas of Vijayanagara and their chiefs and officials. Kampana was aided in this great achievement by his Brahman minister Gopanarya and his general Saluva Mangu, the ancestor of the great Saluva Narasimha, who started the second dynasty of Vijayanagara and whose achievements are described in the introduction to the Jaimini Bharatamu of Pillala Marri Pinavira Bhadra and in the first canto of Rajanatha Dindima's Shaluvabhyudayam. The later work deals the expeditions of Saluva Mangu against the Sambhavaraya and the Sultan of Madura and enumerates the several titles which he assumed and which his descendants continued to bear. The achievements of Kumara Kampana are borne out by sufficient epigraphic testimony as well. His conquest of the kingdom of Rajagambira is clearly evidenced by a record of AD 1365, and another describes how he destroyed the Turushkas, established orderly government throughout the country, and appointed chiefs or Nayakanmas for the control and proper maintenance of temples. Another equally meritorious service done by Kampana was the reconsecration of the great temple of Srirangam. It had been most probably sacked by Malik Kafur. The invasion of AD 1327 to 28, ordered by Muhammad Tughlaq, is held to have resulted in its complete destruction. According to the Koiluluhu, a Tamil work which describes the benefactions done to the temple in the different epochs from its foundation down to the 18th century, and portions of whose information appear to be derived from inscriptions, there is the tradition of the Musalmans under Malik Kafur, after having conquered Prataparudra, entering Srirangam by the north gate and carrying away all the property of the temple, including the image of the god, which later was recovered by a miraculous chain of circumstances. The sack of the temple in AD 1327 to 28 is supported by a date given in the Koiluluhu, equivalent to Shaka 1149 instead of Shaka 1249, possibly an error and Akshaya, and also by accounts embodied in the Vaishnava Guru Parampara and the Telugu work Acharya Sukti Muktavali. From this sack, both Pillalokacharya and the famous Vedanta Desika escaped, the former going south and the later to the Mysore country. After prolonged sufferings, the survivors carried the image of the god to Tirupati, from which it was taken over to Gingee by Gopanarya and ultimately installed at Srirangam and reconsecrated. Gopanarya was told by god Ranganatha, who appeared to him in a vision, to lead an invasion against the Muhammadans and to establish his image once more at Srirangam. He marched according to Anantarya's Prapannamritam, a work dealing with the history of Sri Vaishnavism in South India and the lives of its successive acharyas, from Tirupati to Gingee, where for a time he kept the images. There were two of them in the neighboring rock cut shrine of Shingavaram. He then advanced south, destroyed the Muhammadan forces at Samayavaram, and consecrated the images once more in the Srirangam temple, whereupon Vedanta Desika returned joyfully to Srirangam, composed a verse in praise of Gopanarya and his great achievement, and had it inscribed on the walls of the temple. The reconsecration is said to have taken place in Shaka Samvat 1293, equivalent to AD 1371-72. It is the great services of Kampana Odayar of Salvamangu, who is said to have helped in the reconsecration of Srirangam and made a present to it of 60,000 madas of gold, 1,000 shalagramas, and 8 villages to represent the 8 letters of the Ashtakshara, and of Gopanarya, praised by Vedanta Deshika, that constituted the consummation of the successful Hindu reaction against Muslim sway in the Tamil country. The reconsecration of Srirangam and Madura was the restoration of Hindu glory and South Indian independence. The subjugation of the hitherto politically powerful Kurumbas became a matter of necessity to the first Vijayanagara rulers in their attempt to spread their power in the northern portion of the Tamil country. According to tradition embodied in the Mackenzie manuscripts, we have a curious version of the estrangement between the Kurumbas and the Vijayanagara kings. The Kurumbas had fortified many places and established their rule over several districts. They tried to make the landowning classes like the Vellalas render them services which the latter resisted and rejected with contempt. Hence, the upper classes had to seek the aid of the barbers who promised them relief. When one of the Kurumbas died, the barbers went to shave their heads in accordance with custom, and each one managed to cut the throat of the Kurumbar as he was shaving. Thus, the community of the Kurumbas was said to have been destroyed by the barbers. Krishnadevaraya, as we have already seen, destroyed the Marudham fort built by the Kurumbas with the aid of one Bommaraja of Chingalput. According to tradition, we also learn that the rulers of Vijayanagara were benevolent towards the agriculturists, who are the hereditary foes of the Kurumbas, whom they had supplanted as a result of the conquests of Chola Adonde Chakravarti. The Vijayanagara rulers are said to have helped the Vellalars and the Vanniyars against the Kurumbas. The Vijayanagara dominion gradually expanded over southern India. It became in course of time so extensive that it had to be divided into provinces for administrative purposes. Each province was under a Nayak who wielded the absolute power in his own jurisdiction. There were 3 such important Nayaks under the Vijayanagara Empire, besides several minor ones. These were the Nayaks of Madura, Tanjore, and Gingee. End of the chapter. Okay, let's also go through the notes. We'll fastly run through the notes. No note in this page. Karnataka Rajakal Savistara Charitram, or a general history of the Indian peninsula. Old number 214, CM 75. Quote, this work, which is of no ordinary interest or importance, professes to be a general history of peninsular India, Mohammedan as well as Hindu, and to include the period from the commencement of Kali Yuga, corresponding with the installation of Parikshita, son of Abhimanyu, and grandson or Arjuna, down to Kali Yuga 4908, being Acheya year of the Hindu cycle, era of Vikramaditya 1864, equivalent to Salivahana Saka 1729, or Anno Domini 1807 or 8. It is a great pity that there is a small chasm in one place and a much larger one in another, though not in the most valuable portions. End of quote. As analyzed and described by the Reverend W. Taylor in pages 334 to 41 of volume 3 of his catalog Raisani. Quote, Introduction. The usual invocation. The author's name, Narayan of the Anantakon race of Gingee. The book was composed while Lord William Bentinck was Governor of Madras at the special request of Colonel William McLeod, the commissioner at Arcot, who desired Narayanan to write down a narrative of events in India from the earliest times, as such an account would be very acceptable to Europeans. In consequence of this request, Narayanan felt great anxiety that his work should be complete and authentic. And after 6 months' preparatory study, during which he specially procured the aid of learned Mohammedans and acquired from them all the details of their books and records, he wrote down this compendium of results. He offers the customary apology to authors and critics for any deficiency that may be found in his production. The first kanda or section on primeval matters. The second kanda or section relating to the royal line of Hastinapuri. The third kanda or section account of the vilayat and or original country of the Mohammedans. Geographical details and definitions of the country northwest of the Indus adapted to aid in fixing the reference of names in Puranic geography. Section 4th on Delhi affairs. Section 5th account of Timur. Section 6th concerning the Marathas and the Tuluva country. Section 7th on the Hassan dynasty of the Deccan kingdom. Section 8th concerning the lower Karnataka country. Definite boundaries of the Carnatic. The Tonda Mandalam, capital Kanjivaram. The Canara country, capital Seringapatam. The Chola Mandalam, capital here said to be Chenji or Gingee. Chola Desam on the Kaveri, its capital Tanjore. To the south, Pandya Mandalam, capital Madura with Trichinopoly. Chera Mandalam, capital Tirunagiri. Kerala Desam, capital Anantasayanam. Telinga Desam, capital Kolakondai, that is Golconda. William Taylor makes the following remark on this manuscript. Quote, In a general retrospect of the contents of this large manuscript, it appears that the suggestion of an English gentleman produced that rare result, a native Hindu historian, writing under the influence of good sense and in conformity to a prevailing degree with European notions of history. In an abstract, I have not felt myself obliged to verify or compare his dates and facts with other authorities. There are probably some anachronisms and errors, but the value of the whole seems to me considerable. And the eighth section concerning the lower Karnataka country down to the arrival of the English invaluable. To me, that matter is new, and with the incidental coincidences derivable from the other papers in this collection, a narrative may now be carried upwards with some degree of certainty to the era of Krishnarayar, about which time there is only a short interval of anarchy till we reach the regular Chola government. The whole manuscript, but especially the first half of the eighth section, ought, I am of opinion, to be carefully translated and edited. End of quote. On a later examination of section 8, William Taylor makes the following further observation. Quote, I then noticed more critically than on the first occasion how very crude was the language and spelling of words, more like a Mohammedan writing Tamil than a Tamil-speaking man of noble descent. The barbarism of Kodan Tamil or vulgar Tamil is so great as sometimes to cause obscurity as to the meaning. There once existed another abridged copy on palm leaves. Should it be ever recovered, it might be of use to compare with the larger book, and a general correction of the orthography throughout would produce a book well worth printing with a translation on the opposite pages so as to form a diglot. End of quote. Mr. Taylor remarks that in the eighth section, there were very many details of intrigues, perfidies, and consequent wars, long before any Europeans intermeddled with the politics of the peninsula. Just as similar things prepared the way in Bengal for a grand change of rule, so it was in the peninsula. With this, Orme was not so well acquainted as with the early affairs in Bengal. There was published in 1939 at Pondicherry, under the auspices of the Société de la Histoire de l'Inde Française, a French translation of the 8th section on the basis of a copy obtained from the India Office collection entitled Histoire détaillée des rois du Carnatic par Narayanam Paule, traduite du Tamil et annoté par Gnanav Diagov Avocat. Bibliothèque publique, Rue des Capuchins, Pondicherry, pages 224 follow. An English translation of the same manuscript is now being prepared by the author. Next note. Anantakon gave to his tribe the name of Sammana Manar. He was succeeded by Krishnakon, firstly 650, Gonerikon, firstly 680. Both of them built sacred edifices. His son was Govindakon, firstly 700, Palliyakon, firstly 720. He made roads, choultries, and etc. The dynasty now gave way before a Kurumba tribe named Vadaga Ediyar, North Country Shepherds. The first king of this tribe was Kobilingam, firstly 740. He built a brick fort at Chendamangalam or Sendamangalam. He formed some tanks and left others unfinished. Next note. Permacoil, as it is called by Orme, but really Perumukkal, signifying great travail, is an isolated rock rising out of the plain about 6 miles east of Tindivanam. Its name is said to be derived from the legend which attaches to it of Sita, the wife of Rama, having been delivered there of twins Kusha and Lava during her banishment by Rama after her return from Lanka. It was a strongly fortified post during the 18th century and was captured and recaptured by the French and the English on several occasions. During the advance against Pondicherry in 1760, Sir Eyre Coote captured it after a desperate fight in which he received a wound, and the leader of the sepoys behaved with such conspicuous gallantry that he got a gold medal. There are a few ruins here and there which suffice to show where the fortifications stood. Next note. Padaivedu. This desolated place is one of the most historically interesting in the North Arcot district. Though it now contains only less than 1,000 inhabitants, tradition says that it was the capital of a dynasty which many hundreds of thousands of years ago held sway in this part of the country. This no doubt refers to the Kurumbas. The town was 16 miles in circumference and full of temples, choultries, and fine private residences. The extent of the city may be judged by the fact that the present villages of Santavasal, where the fair or Santa was held, and Pushpagiri, the site of the flower market, are 4 miles apart. The city is believed to have been entombed by a shower of dust and stones, which overwhelmed all the area of its magnificent buildings. Jungle has overgrown the whole space of the original city. There are 2 extensive but ruined forts upon the plain, built doubtless by the Kurumbas, and another upon a peak of the Javadi hills, which overlooks the city. There are at the place 2 temples dedicated to Renukambal and Rama. Next note. Succession of the Gingee kings of the Kon dynasty. Ananta, who ruled from 1190 to 1240 AD, Krishna from 1240 to 1270 AD, Govinda from 1290 to 1310 AD, and Pulian 1310 to 1330 AD. The dates are given in the chronicle in firstly years. The firstly is used solely by Hindu clerks in the East India Company's service. During the Musalman government, the firstly was loosely used. Thus, the year Krodhi or AD 1784 is firstly 1193, but in some documents is 1194. The year Saumya or AD 1789 is numbered firstly 1198, but in some places this becomes 1196 and elsewhere 1199. About the year AD 1800, when the country became subject to the English, the firstly year happened to commence on the 13th of July, whereupon the English constituted that day as the beginning of the firstly year, which hereby was metamorphosed into a solar reckoning, but devoid of months, being a mere official year. The Hindus at the present day, only the clerks in government employ, quote the firstly by the last two figures alone. Thus, AD 1820 is called firstly 29, AF 1229, which it is the fashion to mention in Hindustani numerals. Thus, Untis firstly means 1229, and firstly 1239 or AD 1830 is called Untalis firstly, that is 1239. Thus, in Monroe's report of 26th of July 1807, fifth report in page 785, he speaks of the survey rent in 1215, meaning firstly 1215, that is AD 1806, and 1217 and 1218, meaning AD 1808 and 1809. End of quote. C.B. Brown, an ephemeris showing the corresponding dates according to the English, Hindu and Musalman calendars from AD 1751 until 1850 in pages 4 to 5. Next note. This Koparinjunga was a chief of the family of Kadavarayas who, according to recent research, is regarded as having flourished in some degree of glory and power in the years 1229 to 1278. He attempted, with some measure of success, to establish the power and prestige of his family in the region of the present South Arcot district by taking an intensive and creditable part in the triangular struggle for dominance then going on between the Pandyas, the Hoysalas, and the Kakatiyas. He became an independent ruler in the year 1243 and counted his regnal years from that date. He was the able coadjutor of Sundara Pandya I, whose progress in Tondamandalam was rendered possible largely by his assistance and cooperation. His inscriptions are found largely in the South Arcot, North Arcot, and Shingalpur districts, and to a less extent in the Tanjore and Kurnool districts. He assumed many titles like Pandya Mandala Sthapana Sutradhara, Sahodara Sundara, Karnataka Lakshmi Luntaka, Kataka Lankatilaka, Pennanadhinatha, Sarvagna Kadgamalla, Valbala Perumal, Kanakasabha Pati Sabha, Sarvakarya Sarvakala Nirvahaka, and Kaveri Kamuka. His titles included the name of Alagiyasiyan and the epithets of Kavisarva Bhauma and Sahitya Ratnakara. A theory of two Koparinjungas, father and son, bearing the same name has also been put forward, and also different versions are held of his relations with the Pandyas and of his other acts like the imprisonment of the Chola ruler Rajendra III. The Kadavarayas became powerful in the South Arcot district and contributed largely to the dismemberment of the Chola Empire during the 13th and the early part of the 14th centuries. They had for their capital Kudal, that is Kadalur, which is at the junction of two rivers, the Gadilam and the South Pennar, and later at Sendamangalam, which is in the interior in the Tirukkoilur Taluk. The Kadavarayas claimed kinship with the Pallavas. That Koparinjunga ruled or revived his rule from 1242 to 1278 AD should be regarded as a really great personage. The chief Kadavaraya ruler had several subordinate chiefs under him. References refer to number 1 K.A.N. Shastri, The Cholas, Volume 2, Part 1, pages 180 to 4, et sequitur. Number 2, The Kadavaraya Problem by Mr. R. Satyanatha Iyer in the Dr. S. Krishnaswamy Iyengar Commemoration Volume. Number 3, The Kadavarayas by Mr. V. Vriddagirisan in the Journal of Indian History, volume 16th, 1937, pages 137 to 160. Number 4, the Madras Epigraphist's reports of 1922 and 1923. And 5, the Kadavarayas by S. Somasundara Deshikar in the Journal of Indian History, volume 17, part 3. Perhaps the Gopilingan of our chronicle was of the early 14th century. The chronicle says that he ruled about firstly 740. Anyway, the last Cones finished their rule after firstly 720, that is 1331 AD, which is much later, nearly half a century after the death of the great Koperinjinga of the epigraphs. Perhaps this Gobilingan belonged to the clan of the Kadavarayas and distinguished himself by his particular achievements in Gingee and its neighborhood. See the Tamil Lexicon, University of Madras, volume 2nd, pages 1055 to 6. Next note, Epigraphica Carnatica, volume 5, AK 123 and SI, South Indian Epigraphist's Report, 1911, page 33. The Hoysala records say that Veera Someshwara uprooted Rajendra Chola in battle and reinstated him when he begged for protection. For a fuller discussion of this, see K. A. Neelakanta Shastri, The Cholas, Volume 2, 1937, pages 198 to 199, and footnote 75 on page 199. And S.K. Iyengar, South India and Her Muhammadan Invaders, 1921, page 38. Next note. The story is thus given in the Mysore Gazetteer, New Edition, Volume 2, Part 2, page 1406. The king's sister, married to the Senji Raja, was now a widow. She therefore came on a visit to her brother, accompanied by her two sons, Lakkana and Veerana, who were very handsome young men. One of the king's wives conceived a guilty passion for them, but her advances being alike repelled by each in turn, her love changed to hate, and she denounced them to the king as having made overtures to her. The king, justly enraged, ordered them to be at once impaled and their bodies exposed like those of common malefactors at one of the city gates. Hearing what had happened, their unfortunate mother hastened to the palace to demand an inquiry and justice. But it was too late. The fatal order had been executed, and she was not only put out of the palace, but the inhabitants was forbidden to give her any assistance. In the agony of despair, she wandered from street to street, invoking the vengeance of the Almighty on her brother and predicting the speedy downfall of his empire. Arriving at the Potter Street, worn out with fatigue and sorrow, she requested and received a draught of water, in return for which act of kindness she declared that in the destruction of the capital, that street should be spared. It is the only one that has survived. End of quote. Next note, H.A.R. Gibb, Ibn Battuta Travels in Asia and Africa, published by Broadway Travelers in 1929, page 264. Next note, Epigraphica Carnatica, 3rd volume, MD 100. Next note, the same Epigraphica Carnatica, volume 10, MR 82. Next note, for a detailed study of this aspect of the question relating to the Mohammedans of Madura and the Hoysalas, read B.N. Salatore, Social and Political Life in the Vijayanagara Empire, Volume 1, 1934, pages 4 to 18. Next note, Veera Kamparaya Charitram, Introduction 35. See also Sources of Vijayanagar History, pages 23 to 28. Next note, Robert Sewell, Lists of the Antiquarian Remains in the Presidency of Madras, Volume 1, 1882, page 207. J.H. Garstin, The Manual of the South Arcot District, 1878, page 2. Epigraphia Indica, Volume 3, pages 224 to 29, wherein the inscription is edited by V. Venkayya. V. Rangacharya, Inscriptions of the Madras Presidency, Volume 1, page 169, in the year 1919. The next note, the earliest date hitherto discovered for Harihara II is Shaka Samvat 1301 and the latest 1321. Next note, the political and cultural significance of the restoration of these great shrines by Kampana Salva Mangu and Gopanarya should be fully evaluated at its true worth. It was only after this achievement that cleared the country of the last vestiges of Muslim sway and removed all chances of its recovery that Harihara II assumed imperial titles in full style. Quote, the illustrious King of Kings and the Supreme Lord of Kings, the Lord of the Eastern, Southern, Western, and Northern Oceans, the unopposed, a Vainateya, Garuda to the snakes of wicked kings and princes, an adamantine cage for refugees, the Dharma Yudhishthira of the Kali age, the ear ornament to the goddess of the Karnataka country, the supporter of the four castes and orders, he whose only delight is the fame of virtue, the destroyer of the pride of the tiger, the master in establishing the Chera, Chola, and Pandya kings, the publisher of the commentaries on the Vedas, the master in establishing the ordinances prescribed by the Vedas, he who has provided the Advaryu with employment. End of quote. As Dr. S.K. Iyengar aptly remarks, quote, we may pardon the egoism and appreciate the praiseworthy effort underlying it. End of quote. Pages 187 to 8, South India and her Mohammedan invaders. End of chapter. Okay, next chapter is chapter 3, Gingee under the Vijayanagara Nayakas, which we will see in the next video.